Gianmarco Soresi, thanks for doing the podcast.
Hello, my pleasure.
Out here in LA, what brings you to town?
My girlfriend, she's a manager, and she just wanted to go out. And I always look for an excuse. My mom lives out here, sisters live out here. Kind of test, like, you kind of, it's a litmus test of how you're doing when you come out here and be like, who wants to give me spots?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, oh, cool, this person, all right, I'm moving up in the world. But the strange time to come out. We found out the day before about the mask mandate
time is back. Yeah,
coming back. So nothing's been canceled. I still feel good.
Yeah,
and it's a different flow. It's like doing one show average a night as opposed to like in New York 3 or 4.
Yeah, I did 2 yesterday, and the guy's like, "Where are you on the second show?" And I'm like, "Stressed." Then the 405 is traffic, and it was the same stress of doing 4 in New York is 2 here.
And I saw some comedian be like, "I have 3 shows tonight. We'll see." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's LA."
Yeah, I mean, I tried to do 5 in New York last week. Didn't pull it off. I got to 4.
I've seen enough of these. I've had enough like 6 show days in New York that
6?
I know.
You've done a 6?
I've done a 6. Sometimes because you have like a brunch, you have an early show or something.
Okay.
But I know well enough when I see some flyers, I'm like, they're not making all those shows.
Yeah, that was probably mine.
Yeah. It happens.
Yeah.
And you just have to decide which show is okay to miss.
Yeah. And then also, next time I'm going to double check the start time, because that's what threw me. One of them started at 7, but didn't start till 8:30. And I was like, well, that's kind of threw me off.
Of course.
Yeah.
I only once so far have I had. I was featuring at Bananas Comedy Club, and someone wrote
Bananas,
great club, and someone wrote
Is that
me
in Jersey?
Yeah, Hasbrook Heights, and I got that dreaded message. Hey man, you close?
Right.
And I was like, oh, I don't know.
I got that last night.
I don't even know what this is regarding.
I got worse. Where are you?
Brutal.
With a picture of the lineup.
Brutal.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was headlining some bar show, but I think I might have lied. I'm not proud of it, but I do tell little white lies.
Like what?
Blaming a lot on subways. New York is tough because the subway really is the problem a lot, but we also all collectively use it to lie all the time.
Yeah. Perfect excuse.
So you never know. You never know when someone's bullshitting you or not.
And you can't really Uber around to spots anymore because you'll go broke. It's so expensive now.
Yeah.
Which
is good, right? It's expensive because they're paying their workers more.
Yeah, but there's no cabs, and cabs didn't used to be that expensive. And like, there's something about it that seems wrong.
Well, the subway should be better. The New York subways are a constant source of frustration, and having lived in New York for like a decade, you just feel the decline.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I'm convinced that the only way they're gonna take the subway seriously is a whole train's gonna die, and I hope I'm not on it. It's gonna come off the rails, it's gonna go flying into another train. 2 whole trains will explode, and then they'll go, okay,
Fine.
I
thought it was pretty. I had no issues on the train this trip.
got lucky. You got lucky.
Yeah.
You got lucky. Weekends sometimes it's just
less populated than it used to be.
Definitely a little bit less, but like it came back pretty fast.
Yeah.
I remember when I was still like super scared of COVID, I was amazed that you guys here in LA seem to be having a rougher time because we were packed in these subways and buses.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. We're just stronger.
Hey, what's your podcast about?
It's called The Downside.
Okay.
It's me and my good friend Russell Daniels, we interview mostly comedians. I'm trying to not just do stand-up
comedians
comics.
are who you know, so it's like,
and they're fun. Sometimes you have a non-comedian and you're like, oh boy,
you can't fill the air and it's a little awkward.
Yeah. But it's kind of a podcast where we focus on the negatives and I have people complain, and we end up talking a lot about death and disease, and then at the end we all share one blessing. One good thing we feel good about that week.
Is death and disease something you think about?
Death more so, and disease I guess connected to that. But I always was anxious about death.
Because you don't want to die, or because you have things you want to accomplish?
All those. I'm very scared about how I'm going to die, the kind of pain one will experience. I constantly think about, and I'm in therapy. Okay. And kind of the idea of invasive thoughts. Like I told my girlfriend, it's a horrible thing, but every time I remember going to Auschwitz on like a Europe, like, you know, going to a tour of Auschwitz. And one of the things that always resonates so horrifically with me is the ovens and the idea of someone being put into an oven to die. And every time I use an oven, I get that thought of like, if I was put in there. And that's an invasive, you know, so it just pops into my head and I'm able to let it go eventually. But that's what I think about a lot, especially when I'm stoned. Whenever I get high, I always go through some phase where I start feeling very existential. What happens when you die? What's the meaning of life? What if I die in an oven?
Do you have a thought of what happens when you die?
No, I went through a phase where I was like obsessed with wanting to know. And I've settled on some kind of very fruity belief that, you know, crunchy granola, fruity. I don't mean fruity, but like, you know, like ooh, of consciousness. It's hard to define, and perhaps the world is all made up of consciousness. It's not fully comforting. It's not like I will be here hanging out with
like
my
in
buds.
The clouds with your cloud car and
yeah.
your cloud friends.
Yeah, I don't know if I could drive. I can't drive now. That would be nice if I got to heaven. He was like, well, now you know how to drive.
Like the Care Bears have the cloud car?
That would be fun.
That'd be fun.
That seems a lot safer, for sure.
Yeah, the kind of soft impact.
Yeah. So I like settled on some weird loosey-goosey religious thing that calms me down.
Yeah.
At my most cynical, I can feel like, am I a nihilist lying to myself?
I'm sure a lot of therapy deals with this topic. This is probably a popular one in therapy.
But they can't. I would hate for my therapist. I don't know what she believes in that sense. She very much is not a therapist who shares that with me, because I think she's of the mindset, and I don't disagree, where like if she were to profess, you know, if she professed some specific religious belief, I would go, oh, you're crazy, and I will no longer come here, because that's how I am.
Oh, because do you feel that it would taint her advice?
Yeah, I just wouldn't trust her. I'd be like, you seem too sure about that, or like this belief is too specific.
Yeah, I guess it would taint your perspective of their advice. I guess maybe with therapy, it's a bit more storytelling. Like you're listening and telling back stories and sometimes anecdotes to address your specific situation. Yeah. And if that anecdote is rooted in a religious belief, potentially, maybe that you wouldn't take them as seriously.
Yeah.
But if they're doing like medical stuff, it probably would never come up.
Sure. But I always want to know more. Like my therapist is very much like, she's answered a couple things. Like I know she has kids. I know one of them is in college or just started college, but that's pretty much it. I don't know how many kids. I don't know how old. And she does that on purpose. I know people that are like, I'm in a fight with my therapist. And I'm like, you're in a fight with your therapist? What the fuck are you talking about? Or like, they have these relationships that feel more friend-based, or it feels like self-help and therapy are different things. And that's what's tough about. I always think everyone should be in therapy, but I think there's obviously a lot of terrible therapists out there.
Do you feel because you're a comedian that you revert to wanting to talk to them?
To a certain extent, but I think I go there and I'll make jokes now and then, but I'm pretty fight myself to be like kind of very honest with her. For example, if I'm late because of the trains, or not because of the trains, I will never lie about it.
So that's the one place where you're like, it was.
I really push to be honest. I really push to be honest, because I feel like every relationship is tainted with lies, and the closer the friend, the less lies that you tell. Not just lies of like what you did that day, but lies of like that looks bad, or I don't like that you did that. Like I just think honesty is a real part of close relationships.
Do you think we have true honesty right now? Because so much of our life is on social media, where there's a certain dishonesty to it all.
Yeah, I think it's horrifically dishonest. I think like when I think of the people I'm closest with, it's like my girlfriend right now, and I have like 5 buddies that I'm really try to be honest with. But there's still lies you protect, especially in this field. I always think it's interesting when you're an artist, if you have other artist friends, like you really need to respect their work in some capacity, because if you don't, it gets in the way because you don't know how to talk to them, or if they're struggling with something. The real impulse you might have is like, you're
not good.
Quit.
Right.
You should produce more. Yeah. You should
That was on one of the Comedians in Cars with Coffee. They asked Seinfeld, could you be friends with someone if you didn't like their act? And he said no.
Yeah. I think you could be friends with someone that, like, it's not your cup of tea, but you respect, like, you think they're doing smart work. I think
that's the same answer.
Yeah. But as you get older, you start, a lot of conversations, I think, between comedians are kind of like, how did you build a career where you could make a living?
Right.
And you can,
right.
there's some people I can respect how they built a following, how they figured out how to tour. And as long as their comedy isn't like dreadful, we can get along.
Yeah. Or you see seeing improvement is good too. Like you can be friends
sure.
with someone who's on the come up and you're like, wow, you're getting better so fast. And that's something too.
But I'd be paranoid that, like, if I was close with someone and I thought they didn't like my work, I'd start getting paranoid. I already am paranoid.
Well, we all are, because we're friends with people who we get other work through comedians.
Yeah.
So we're friends with people who give us stuff, and sometimes they don't give you stuff.
Sure.
Or book you or these things, and you start going through the monologue in your head of like, why would that be?
Of course. Well, you have a show.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm sure there can be paranoia now and then, because, you know, it's a
absolutely
cool
I'm speaking
show.
from experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the. I mean, do you run one in New York or no?
No, I used to
avoid that.
I used to run when I started out. I ran a weekly. It never reached great heights.
Yeah.
Different venues. This venue stopped. That venue stopped, and I just couldn't care enough about it. And when everything came back, I thought about it.
Yeah.
And there also just this point with shows where, like, I wrote once. I said, if you want to make some friends really quickly, but a lot of enemies over time, start producing a show. Because there are people who have never, you know, in 4 years have never booked me on something. And you can't help but feel like, oh, really? Never.
Yeah.
Not once. All right, fuck you then. You can't not.
I feel like,
not.
correct me if I'm wrong, it's easier to get on smaller shows in New York because there's so many smaller shows. It might be harder to get through the club system or something there in certain on the top tier clubs, but there's so much like comedy there.
There's so much comedy, but like there's the cool shows that like feel really hard to penetrate, or you cannot, you know, it's some booker you never met. I just got on like a really cool Brooklyn show called Butterboy, and I was like,
that's one of the hard ones to get.
That's one of the hard ones, and it's booked by someone who I had never met. I just had never met her, and I was never in the Brooklyn spaces that she might be at some time. And now that I met her, it feels like oh, maybe a new kind of world has opened up.
Right.
And that's very cool. But there's some people who just don't like you, or they saw you when you were too green, and they associate you with this like shitty version. One producer who once told me that I was too one-man show, and I'm like, I don't think they'll ever change their mind about me,
right?
Because that's how they see me, and that is what I am. I am like a loud, gregarious comedian.
Yeah, you're very dynamic, and you have a lot of stage presence,
and you kind of got to make peace with it sometimes. But it can be hard in New York because there's only so many clubs. There's only so many clubs in LA. There's only so many clubs in New York. And sometimes a new booker will take over a club, and you want to say to them, like, this was part of my living. Please don't never book me, because this was part of my, like, you know.
It's like being fired when a new like a job comes.
Yeah, exactly.
But without being fired.
Yeah, without being
just
fired.
Just getting less timesheet.
And it's so brutal. So like there's times I wish I had those shows, because it helps. I would never spot trade directly, but you're a liar. No one you know, it helps. There are people, if you're on their show, they'll help you out, they'll give you a hand.
There's a mutual, like, it works best when it's not addressed.
Yeah.
When it's very, I'll trade you this, it feels gross.
Yes.
But if there's a thing, like, we all understand what we're trying to do, all of us.
Yeah.
And this is like a thing, like, of course you helped me out. It's like, kind of like, I like the philosophy of give before you receive.
Yes. But you end up doing, this is a gross reveal, but when I first started comedy, I think I had like 2 shows that I was running. And like one was better than the other. Yeah. And so there was a certain degree of like, I saved a certain tier of comic for one. And like others, I would put them on it was me trying to like figure out a way to give back, but still have one show that was like, I could,
like a premium
express
show.
my taste more and be like, these are comics I think are really funny, and this is another show where I'm like spreading the love.
Right.
But like, it ends up being gross, and like then I'm making judgments, and anyone with half a brain cell could determine that they were put on the show that was in the shitty place versus the nicer place.
Yeah.
And it's just it can be poisonous.
That seems to be kind of common in New York. People have the A show and the B show.
Yeah, I think it is to a certain extent, but I don't think it's good. And then like, I'm no fool. If I get put on the B show, I'm like, all right, this is how you see me. And it's so many relationships, man.
Yeah.
It's so many relationships. And like, even talking about it, I'm like, am I revealing my grossness? But I'm also like, there is no comedian who isn't also thinking along these lines. We're all figuring out this massive web of like moving up, and it's
overwhelming.
gross. Like, your show was very very cool to be on it. I mean, Eliza Schlesinger is on it, and it's like this is a cool show to be on. I'm very happy I'm gonna do all material that has been worked before.
Right. And that's the other thing too. When you travel to a new city, it's like while I was in New York for a week, I'm like, I worked on some new stuff, but I'm also like, a lot of people don't know me here, so I'm going to do well also. So I'm going to balance it.
I don't feel particularly creatively fulfilled when I make these kinds of trips because I'm just doing the hits.
Yeah.
And I always feel kind of backed up. I never feel great if I don't work on something new. The best feeling I have is when something new finally feels like, I think it's done. That's the best show I can have.
Right.
Just crushing with stuff that you've done for 5 years, I end up feeling like, oh my God.
Or you add a couple tags, or just give I found in New York, I was able to give some of the jokes I've had for a year more space.
Yes.
And when I do them for the third time at night, I have tags on them now I didn't have before, because I'm letting them kind of breathe.
Yeah.
As opposed, like in LA, you can go a day or two without a show.
Yeah.
So you're like,
it's crazy.
I'm sure you probably doesn't happen to you in New York.
Not very often. Now that I have a girlfriend, there's sometimes I need to make some space, maybe take a day off.
Like a lunch?
Yeah. But it's a struggle. I operated for so long as my own being. I wasn't even really dating. And so just every night it would be like, I'll do the 12:40 spot in Times Square at night. And now I'm like, oh.
Do you live together?
No, but we live very close. Like
that's
a block
nice.
Away from
That's
each other.
nice.
That's definitely nice. I mean, I think it's its own. It's a weird pseudo living together kind of situation. But it is nice, and it makes me wonder if having two separate places is maybe the life that like is best.
You want to be married but live in two separate places?
I've read some New York Times article once that said there's a married couple who did it and seemed to work out.
Well, I mean, I got claustrophobic. I was in this little hotel in Chelsea for a week, and it was like, after a while, I'm like, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah. She has night terrors, and if they get bad, they've been very good. They've gotten a lot better, but there's a couple times they get really bad, and I get to at 3 a.m. be like, all right, baby, I'm gonna go back to my place.
Yeah,
and that is a blessing to have.
She's
that
just screaming
space.
in her bed and with her eyes closed. You're like, I'll see you in the morning.
Yeah.
How do you want your eggs?
Exactly.
Yeah, and you're balancing a lot of things though. You're an actor. You have a podcast. Like what? I feel like every comedian has to have that thing they balance to be like, all right, I want to do comedy full time, but there's this other thing that's going to make me a household name.
Yeah.
Do you feel that's going to be acting for you?
It's so hard to know. I've gotten more auditions this past year, and I always think like, man, if I had these auditions before I started stand-up comedy, I would have slaved over them. I would have memorized them fully. I would have gone to coaches for every single one.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like they come at a place where I'm like, it's not my priority, but it is better for it's a real struggle. The podcast is new. These auditions are new, and I have a paranoia where I'm always like, I want to stay a good stand-up. And I have a lot of like backed up material from years of having no TV success or anything. So I have plenty to burn.
Yeah.
I got an hour to burn. That's
Do you
strong.
mean burn like clip it, or burn
that
like...
it's like it's strong enough that like I can use it for if I, God forbid, I get a Tonight Show, a late night spot. Like I feel like I have this backup of material that's fine-tuned. But I always, in the last couple months with the podcast especially, which the workload is insane, I'm like, I'm not writing enough. I'm not working on the stand-up enough. And I just want to make sure I never let the stand-up go.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's the thing that I feel my talents lend itself to. And that's the thing I can be great at. Obviously, when I talk to a casting director, I act like, I'm very
That's the side
confident
thing,
in my
the
acting.
stand-up thing.
Yeah.
No, all actors need to do stand-up now.
And I'm sure if I get an acting thing, like a real acting thing, I'll have to figure out, because I don't want to do a shitty job.
Right.
And there was a time when like I was the kind of actor like I would go study the fucking I did a play where I had to play like a Bronx guy, and I went to the Bronx and I went to bars and I like hung out and like just talked to people there and worked on the accent and
real method.
Yeah, very method. And but I just love stand up. And I just know so many people where the stand up goes south, and I'm like, I never want to be that.
Do you think it's because the stand up, is it the writing of the stand up that goes first? Because that's to me, when I get busy, it's not the stand up that goes away, but the day spent writing goes away.
Yes. I think it's that. And like, I think when I'm making a set for something that hopefully is going to be cool. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
And the jokes I'm ending up using are like, I'm like, damn, I started working on this joke like 4 years ago. And you're like, I guess it takes 4 years to really find the perfect version of that joke. So like I have some new stuff that's working.
Yeah.
But like it's not part of the set. It's not part of the set for a reason, and it's because it's not fucking perfect. It's not just like the best version it could be. And so in my head I'm like, you got to remember, great comedy takes a long time to make and cook and stew, and you do it and then you drop it, and then you do it here, and you do it at 10 different, you do it in Connecticut for a crowd of only old people, and in Brooklyn and in Harlem, and only then
does it come together.
Are you like, ooh, this is ready for like a taping?
Yeah.
And so again, like it's like I think I have backed up material that is strong enough, but I always have this like neurotic thing of like it's gonna run out, and then I'm gonna like have to do something for something big, and I'll be working on material that's not strong enough.
Right. And it's also circumstantial. Like you could be having your new bit work into your 5 to 10 or whatever you're trying to have for this thing you're doing, because it fits the story and through line of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Or maybe because what you've been doing for a longer time, you have a tighter through line of a story, and also now it's time to release it. It's kind of like first in, first out. Like it's sitting here done, and there's an opportunity. Like, all right, let's get that out there, and then keep this other stuff moving forward.
Yeah, this thing I'm preparing. I had this bit about the presidential fitness test. Did you ever take that?
No.
It was like this
for the United States.
Yeah, it's this government like exercise exam that a lot of schools took. Like they got rid of it a while ago, but it was like you'd have to see how many pull-ups you could do, how many crunches you could do in a minute, how many push-ups you could do, and any kid who was unathletic, this was like the most embarrassing thing ever. And there's a swath of the population that knows it, but I like had this chunk, and I like wanted to do it for something, and there's a middle part that's just weak, and I say to myself in my head, I'm like, no, I think it works. Or like, oh, it only works for like an educated crowd, because like it refers to Lyndon B. Johnson and it refers to FDR, and I'm like, okay, it only works for an educated crowd. And then I wanted to use it for something, and then I start doing it every show, and then you go in your back of the head, I'm like,
it's like the lull of every set.
It's the lull of every set, and the beginning works and the end works and the middle, and you're like, no, and you try to fix it fast, but sometimes you can't.
Yeah, I have the same problem with I have a long story bit at the end, and like the first 2/3 of it are great, but I just don't have a way of like tying the bow.
Yeah. And you'll find something later. It'll be like I had a joke, and it involved Alzheimer's. It was about like someone I walk with my feet turned out. Okay. And someone once asked me, do you walk? And it's because I have flat feet, but someone said, do you walk like that because you used to be a professional ballet dancer?
Is it noticeable?
Yes. Yeah, I've always been like very strange.
Okay.
It's very weird looking. And someone said, "Oh, do you walk like that because you used to be a professional ballet dancer?" And I was like, "Oh, I wish I had that kind of optimism. Like I meet someone with dementia, and I'm like, oh, they must have been an NFL running back."
Yeah, yeah.
And it was so interesting because for so long I made it Alzheimer's, and it worked fine.
Yeah.
But something about dementia. Finally, one day I made it dementia, and it just like made it way better.
Yeah.
And it was like a year later that is like, oh, dementia is what people associate with CTE and NFL, and that happens to be the thing.
Right.
And it's like, it was a year later I found that. And if I were a more successful comedian putting things on TV, I might have done that version earlier, and it would have been fine. Mm-hmm. But I found the better version later.
Yeah.
And I think it's just that kind of like grindstone every stand-up comic has to be doing.
And to have the will to try to change the word.
Yeah.
To try it every possible way. Like to be willing to be like, all right, tonight I might torpedo this whole bit that I know works by trying a new line that may or may not be better, and we'll see.
So much of comedy is just about editing. I struggle where like if I come up with a joke that like works, that I have a part of me that honestly I'm like, it's not hacky, but it's like it's been done.
Yeah. Or it's obvious.
Yeah, it works really well, or it like really pops.
Yeah.
But this joke has been done in the 80s.
Right.
And
or the punchline is something that's kind of obvious. It's been a punchline of other things.
Yeah.
It's just like a topic that's like an easy punchline.
Or dark for the sake of dark.
Yeah.
And it's a real, I feel like one of my bigger weaknesses is like letting those go, or just being like, all right, let it go.
Yeah.
And I'll see it in my Word document of all of my jokes. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to let it go. And it's it's taking up headspace that doesn't need to be there.
I'm in the process of letting one go because I was like, I felt the same way. I'm like, is it like actually good? And then last night someone went. And you're like,
brutal.
All right, my internal, like, because no one it was always working. But in my head, every time I'd say it, I would say went. And then once the audience finally did that, I was like, okay, has to go.
It's that the worst is when the audience says the punchline before you get to it.
Oh, I've never had that.
I've had it. Well, good for you. Yeah. But I've had one or two where
maybe they said it and I didn't hear it.
You hear one audience member like kind of predicted, and you're like, fuck. And then you're like, well, maybe they're a genius.
Yeah. But like good comedy, it's funny because it's true, right? Like,
yes.
There's some truth to it that the person laughs because they're like, that's so true. Yeah. So in the back of their minds, they have to be thinking of it, or it goes over their head.
Yeah.
Like if they didn't say like, oh, Lyndon Johnson in your bit, like that's so true, it would go over their head. Like, I don't know who Lyndon Johnson is.
Yeah.
There's no truth to it for them.
For sure. Comedy's hard, man.
Yeah. Well, we're about to do Comedy on the Beach tonight, so that's going to be hard and fun.
Well, and I'm bringing only the hits to this show.
Only the hits?
Only the hits. I just, some people I haven't met there. For me, it's more about like comedians who have never seen you perform. You want to kill once in front of them. Yeah. And once you feel that, then I feel more like, all right, I can fuck around.
Right. But you've done the show before.
I've done the show before, but there's some comedians on it that, have never seen me, who I know. Yeah. I just want them to know what's what.
Have a good impression of you.
Yeah. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad. But ultimately, you want to be known as like someone who can deliver.
Yeah. I mean, you can't go there and do this isn't a workout show. Yeah. So you got to do some stuff.
But I think ultimately it's like if you progress. Yeah. Like, hopefully, I do hope there's a day where I can go to this show called the Open Mic, the Beach Open Mic.
Ocean Mic.
And just not shit the bed on purpose. Yeah. But just be like, I got a big spot at the Comedy Store coming up, and I'm going to talk to you about a couple things and see what works. Yeah. And have being able to be like, if some people in the audience go, oh, that guy sucked, be like okay with that. I don't know. I hope to someday get better, and I feel like this year, once we got back from COVID, because there's still some old jokes that you had a year of not using them, but they still feel a year old. Yeah. And I'm trying to like pick certain jokes that I have, especially like savers. Right. Like jokes that are from year one. Yeah. That I'm like, don't ever go to this joke. Find your new savers. Like, but there's that feeling where you're not doing great, and you're like, ooh, I have a couple from that first year that just always work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it. And that's hard to
stop.
hard. It's hard.
What are some of your goals for this next year coming up?
I really want to do a late night, of course, but that's not in my control, obviously.
Yeah.
So I'm doing more headlining on the road. All I want to do is just keep writing new material and fine-tuning jokes. I think it would be wise if this year I could start using these headlining sets to like start to build an hour that is like, I'm like, oh, this is the best hour I can do from beginning to end,
right.
order-wise. I hate coming up with order. I hate it so much. I fight it. I viscerally hate that process, but I think I released a special last year, an outdoor thing during like the pandemic when there was like a little people.
Where is it available?
It's on Amazon.
On Amazon, okay, great.
And got released on Spotify. And it got nominated for some daytime Emmys in some very strange categories.
Oh, that's great! Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But that was the first time, and I only did it because I had a bunch of COVID material that was going to expire. That I was like, I think I'm proud of this. I want to use it.
Right. It's a timestamp of the time too.
Yeah. And that was like, I think it was like 30, 35 minutes. And that was the first time I forced myself to come up with the full order.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm going to keep my ear to the ground and see like, well, is there industry enough that like someone will ask me for 15 minutes or a 30 or an hour in the next year or two? And if not, be like, all right, produce the hour. The last special, it felt like it got some traction. I want to film an hour, come up with that order, and kind of burn that material in my mind, which is tough. I think in my head, there's always this thing of like, well, I
gotta start over.
There's this joke, like there's a first joke that I'm like, I want it to be on my first late night set.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, I have to be like, all right, you know what? Yeah. Let it go. You'll have a new joke for your first late night.
You got to feed the opportunities that are present for you at the time.
Yeah.
Which is a big part of it.
So my main goal is just being a better comedian, but I think unless it feels like someone is asking for filmed material, doing it myself, doing an hour or 45 minutes, and feeling really proud of it. Because I felt good about myself releasing that 30 minutes, and it just felt like, right, I'm making something.
Yeah.
Kind of proceed. I think it took me a long time because I was an actor, and as an actor, you kind of like, I will play the game of the industry. And as a comedian, you're looking and you're seeing like half the comedians have really skewed the industry altogether.
Right. You mean like the traditional like power structure?
Yeah. And they're like,
and they're doing well at it too.
Look at like a Tim Dillon type, and you're like, he's touring, he's doing every venue I would kill to play, and like he did it all on his own. And it's like, proceed as if no industry is ever going to work with me again, and hope that things come, but just like proceed. That's why I'm doing the podcast. That's why I'm doing it.
I feel like it's the same industry, but instead of being like old Hollywood people help me, it's hey, tech algorithm help me.
Yes.
So we've just kind of pivoted to kowtowing to a new industry, which is tech.
Yeah.
It's and like we've become clickbait generators. Like so it's very strange. Now it's like, all right, I have to make clip stuff and put things that people will click, and that I have to be good at that now.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
And I don't think it is in line with work. I know so many comics who I respect them because they built like a tour or something, but like I can see that their comedy is declining and I get it. I've made TikToks. That shit takes forever.
Oh yeah, it takes a long time.
Fucking takes forever.
Yeah.
And so just their output becomes more extreme, and it's doing well for them, but their comedy gets reduced, or they're releasing so much material, it's all kind of B material. Or to get a following, they really lean into like a theme. Like I'm the sad comedian. I'm the comic with mental illness, and
like a brand.
And I'm like, I don't want. You want the brand to be I'm funny.
Yeah.
But I don't know, as I get older, I might be like, you know what? I need money.
But
I want to go out to dinner more.
When a company creates a product, they can try to message what this brand is. Like, this candy bar is about wholesome ingredients.
Yeah.
But the people who buy it might be like, we just like the taste. So you can go out with the brand you say you're going to make, but at a certain point, people are going to watch you and say, all right, I think this comedian is these three things. And that's just going to happen.
For sure. It's going to, and I think about it like, I had a thought of, should I make a clean album? Right. You hear like the clean albums get more Sirius XM play and you make some money. And then there's another part of me, I'm like, I'm not a clean comic. Mm-hmm. In my soul, I'm not a clean comic. It's just not what I do.
You got to be true to yourself more than anything. But what are those three things for you? Like, because you're conscious of, you have high self-awareness, you're in therapy. Like, if you had to put those three items on yourself, like, I am a comedian who's these three things, like, what would they be?
I'm like a comedian who struggles with nihilism and being like a full-on nihilist. Mm-hmm. And that's connected to being like depressed and anxious. And I don't think those things are lend themselves to cleanliness, because the idea of being clean buys into like the premise of that order is good, or that the idea of like being clean and like, who are we doing this for? And being clean when people are dying and suffering and there's horrible things happening in the world. Something about it rubs me the wrong way.
Do you think, is that clean like no swears, or like clean like just the angle of the material also has to be wholesome? Because I feel like those are two different things.
Yeah, both those two. But even no swears to me feels disingenuous. I grew up, my father sweared like a madman. Mm-hmm. And it's part of my language. Yeah, that's how I speak. There's nothing I hate more than like, on TikTok I have to do it because they'll take down your videos if you don't.
Well, it's broadcast regulations.
Yeah, right? But like, that's insane. That's insane to put the word fuck but put a star in between. We all know what it says. So what is this for? Who is this for? What are we lying about? Now, you have a kid. Yeah. And I'm sure with kids, someone might feel differently. I was a kid. My father let me watch everything when I was extremely young.
Mean Streets.
Yeah, the ones for me, it was Species.
Okay.
It was a James Bond movie. You know the movie Species?
Yeah.
Yeah. It just happened to come out when I was like a 6-year-old kid.
Such a weird reference.
But it had tits in it. We saw Swordfish when I was like 11. Yeah. Hugh Jackman gets a blowjob as he has to like solve a piece of computer code. You see Halle Berry's tits. And I think like, you know what? There were some things maybe I saw a little too early, and maybe they could have been explained as I saw them. Mm-hmm. But I think you're lying to yourself to a certain degree.
Well, I mean, coming back, there's regulations in place for broadcasts so that if people don't get surprised by it. So you turn on the TV, you're not like surprised by things. Yes. Whereas internet's more of like you search for things. Yeah. So one is like a push, this media is being pushed to you. The other one's a pull. I'm looking for it.
I agree. Which
is why the internet is more free for all, because you're like, I'm looking for this, therefore I will give it to you. Or if you turn on TV at home and your values represent, hey, I want to have a clean household for whatever that means, then you don't want to be surprised. But and that's why legacy media is so, it still feels like it's from a long time ago.
Of course. But that's why I feel like the news is dark and fucked up. You're talking about real life.
But they sanitize it. I mean, look at wars. Wars are sanitized. Yeah. For the news.
And I think that's bad news. I think that's for the, if I don't want my kid to see the world, like, that people had this thing with Trump where they're like, the kid's going to see the president talking this way. And I'm like, well, I guess you fucking have to, because this is the person we elected as the president. Yeah. So if you want your kid to learn about, I think so much about the way we were taught about, Christopher Columbus and Native Americans. And it's like, I don't think you would ever want to teach children a sanitized version of the Holocaust. And my argument is like, what happened with eventually Americans and the way the genocide of Native Americans was a genocide. So you should never teach a sanitized version of that. either teach history or don't teach history. Because if you're going to teach a sanitized version, then your kid, hopefully, is going to eventually learn the real version and kind of have to... You should never tell your kid about the stork delivering the baby. Why would you teach a lie? Because someday they'll have to figure it out, and then they're going to find out, oh, they were lied to
What
earlier.
about Santa Claus? That's not far from a stork.
It's not far from a stork, but at least with Santa Claus, the lie is entirely... I mean, I would say don't. Enjoy the story of it.
Yeah.
But I think the lies are... And I know you have a different point of view, or you might because you have a kid, but I'm just like, they're going to find out later.
I think the thing is they know, and they go along with it.
I believed in Santa.
Did
you think
really?
These kids are like, thanks, Santa? I remember talking to him on the phone, and I was like, I talked to Santa.
You really believed in it?
Yeah, don't act like I was some like dumb kid. I think a lot of kids...
No, I'm surprised.
I remember this big scandal happened in my school where a 7th grade teacher at assembly said, when you all believed in Santa Claus and outgrew it, and some parent called and said, we have not told them Santa isn't real.
Yeah.
And so I guess this kid in 7th grade found out, and this teacher got in trouble, I guess, for revealing that it was a lie. And that's insane. That's insane.
That's too... I mean... What, grade 3, 4? Stop? 5?
I don't know.
Somewhere around there. 7, it's like...
Why do we need it? Why do we need it, though?
We don't need anything. This is all just because.
Yeah. I just think, like, there's got to be some kind of betrayal a child feels.
Yeah.
Or
This leads into something that I like to ask, which is, there's these things in our lives that we do, whether it's Santa or whatever, we take them out and our life moves on and we get better. And as a comedian or actor, we pile on. We're like, oh, if I can get to the next run by adding something, I'll do this. I'll also do a podcast. But like, has there been things you're like, I take this away and I've gotten better? Like I've eliminated something and my life has gotten better. I've been more productive in other areas.
I'm very bad at eliminating.
Oh.
I mean, it's a real struggle.
Yeah,
I think
it's hard. It's the hardest thing to do, I think.
I let go. This is why the kind of like getting auditions is kind of, there's a weird feeling of like, I let acting go in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. There was a time where I was taking class and I would do the scene study, and now it's impossible. It would be impossible. And I feel spread out a little too thin right now. I'm on a sketch team with like my best friends. Mm-hmm. And
what's it called?
Uncle Function.
Uncle Function.
And they're fantastic. Like they're all such fantastic comedians. Mm-hmm. But it really is hard. I had to back out of a show next month. We do like a monthly show. And it's a big, it's a lot of month.
prep.
You lead up to it. And I had to back out because like a headlining gig I had in Houston on a Saturday, they said, do you want to do the Friday earlier? And it was like, headlining weekend, I got to do this.
You got to say yes. Yeah.
This is 2 hours of practice and practicing hours back to back. And it was really hard. And I feel very anxious about stuff like that. About like, because especially with stand-up, the gigs come in like that.
Right.
And I'm at a level where if I'm going to headline the club, that usually means someone dropped out. Someone dropped out last second. And that's when I get asked. Right.
But you're already there. So it's like your travel's taken care of. Your money's going to go up. Like it's all lined up for you to say yes.
Yeah. And in my mind, like I'm like, oh, I don't have to cut anything down. I'll just have more money to not need to cook anymore. I'll have more money to like buy space in other areas.
Right.
But still, there's only so much brain power.
Yeah.
Especially comedic, like ability to like analyze a joke or a premise and figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, one of the best things I heard about writing is writing, even on like a TV show or a movie, it's like, all right, like if you write for 4 hours, that's a lot of writing, like of actual time writing.
Yeah.
And that kind of is like, oh, a lot of the day is also to be, your brain has to be free so that those 4 hours are writing hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And like sometimes I like to get stoned when I write, and like, but then I got to get stoned and like kind of sit and focus with it. I don't get like blasted, but I just like, I haven't had that space in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also about like how do you write? I more and more I'm getting to a place where I'm like, okay, maybe I really go for some swings on stage. I rarely like went in, I have an idea and I'll talk it out. And now I'm seeing why people do it, because they just don't have enough time. Yeah. So it was very cool. I did, for the first time, I was in Spokane Comedy Club, and I did like 2 headlining on a Friday, 3 on a Saturday.
Oh, congrats!
Thank you. It was so cool.
I mean, I heard that's a great club. I've never done it, but
amazing.
It's I've heard nothing but great things.
A chain that and Skyline Comedy Club, which is in Appleton, astounding clubs. And normally my process is I'll listen back to every set, and when you do 5 hours, you're like, that's a whole 5 hours of listening.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you're like, maybe I don't have to listen to it all back. Maybe I can be more selective in what I listen to.
2 times speed.
True. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, if I'm doing an hour, maybe I really did, after 30 minutes, buy some time to be like, here's a weird thing that happened to me, and this will kind of die a little on the vine, but maybe I'll figure it out. And you'll find it in that pressure cooker.
Right.
So it's all a growing process.
That's amazing.
But, the comedians that you really respect, like the Mark Normans of the world, they're writing new so much. And
if you're not writing, you're dying. I mean, even in the Comedy Store documentary, that was like the through line of it. It's like the people who are good write. And that's stand-up is an exercise in writing.
Yeah.
It's not you can rest. If you rest on what you have for too long, you just stop. It's like constant growth.
Yeah. And that's, my goal during the pandemic, it really was just like, well, just keep writing.
Yeah.
Just keep writing. That's all I can do. And I know some people who kind of stopped and really took that break, and I'm sure it was very tough to get back into it.
Yeah.
It feels like you could lose it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can always find it back.
Well, this has been great. I feel like it flew by super fast. Give us your socials. Tell us where to find you.
I'm at Gianmarco Soresi.
Follow him. Very funny.
Please do. My podcast is called The Downside with Gianmarco Soresi. And that Amazon special, it's also on Spotify and everywhere else. It's called Shelf Life. And I got some cool stuff coming up, so tune in.
Well, I appreciate you coming by. I'm looking forward to going to the beach and doing comedy on the beach tonight with you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks a lot.